Anne-Marie. I am an associate professor of professional practice in the Faculty of Health Sciences at SFU. I did my training at UBC in healthcare and epidemiology, where I did my PhD. And since then, I've moved to SFU to teach. And then I also work for the BC Centre for Disease Control in the area of environmental health. And I am known as a knowledge mobilization scientist there, which means that I take information from the world of academia and scientific research, and then I try to make it sensical for the rest of us. So that's kind of what I'm going to talk to you today a bit more about is radon gas, which I think continues to be one of the more underappreciated health risks in Canada. But before I begin, just to say that I have my funding comes from the provincial and federal government. I have no stake in the radon industry, nor do I profit from any of the talks that I give. I'm also part of a program that provides free radon test kits to Canadians, if you're familiar with the Take Action program, and I'll talk about that a bit at the end. So I'm going to give you a brief overview of what radon gas is today, really quick, but if you have questions, please feel free to, again, pop them in the chat. I'm not going to talk too much about radon and smoking, and you'll see why in a minute. I will focus on what radon exposure is in BC and what we know to date, and then how energy efficiency efforts can influence radon gas. Oh, and then just to go back, sorry, on this little table here is a radon gas test kit, and that's what they look like in real life. And if you're testing a room or your home, you would probably want to test a room like this, which is a living room where people spend a majority of their time. So indoor testing for radon is simple and easy, and it usually just looks like that. So if you hadn't heard of radon before this presentation, you're not alone. The Statistics Canada does ask Canadians questions about radon, and they have done since 2013 to 2021. I'm sorry, that's the most recent data I have at the moment. The 2023 census should be coming available soon. But what we really see is that there is a steady increase in the number of people that have heard about radon. We're not quite at 50% yet, though. And then on the right-hand side, have you tested for radon? And unfortunately, radon is odorless, colorless, and tasteless, so you can't tell if it's in your home. And the only way that you can know is testing. And like I had the picture previously, those little pucks are the way that people can learn how to test and what radon is in their home. So if you were paying attention in Science 9, which for many people like me was a long time ago, you might recall that radon was sitting over there on the right-hand side of the periodic table of elements. It is an inert gas. Again, it's invisible, odorless, colorless, tasteless, and unfortunately also radioactive. So the things on this chart that are radioactive are in a lighter color, and it is a gas. So this means that it has the ability to move around. And unfortunately, it moves from places where it's colder to where it's warmer, and from where particles are denser to where they can be more open. And that's just what gases do. They like to move. And unfortunately, in this case, radon moves from the cold ground into spaces like homes and buildings. So why is it there in the ground? Radon comes from the decay of radium. And you may have heard of radium hot springs, or you might live relatively near to there. But Canada is a uranium-rich country. And where there's uranium, over time, there is also radium. And then radon gas is the phase. So this long chain of compounds here, you can see we start at uranium-238. Oop, I've jumped around. We get to radium-226, and then radon gas. This is the gas phase. So uranium stays in the soil for a very long time. Radium as well, fairly persistent, but radon only lasts for 4 days. But when there's a constant supply, it continually refreshes itself. And then as radon breaks down, it gives off these little things here. These are called alpha radiation particles. This is a beta particle, but this is an alpha particle, and this is ionizing radiation. So this has a very powerful punch. So as radon decays, it gives off this piece of radiation. It doesn't go very far, but what it does do is it can break DNA bonds and lead to the development of cancer. So radon is designated as a known human carcinogen. That means we have enough evidence to clearly state that it causes cancer. This is echoed by all international health agencies, including the WHO and the International Agency for Research on Cancer. Now, many things in our world, people talk about causing cancer. That includes everything from artificial sweeteners to dyes, and more recently, things like alcohol. But what is very clear are what is established known human carcinogens. So when we put something in this category, we know very clearly that it causes at least one specific kind of cancer. In the case of radon gas exposure, it's lung cancer. We don't know if radon causes other kinds of cancer, in part because those haven't been studied. When it was very obvious that people who worked in underground mines that were exposed to uranium developed lung cancer, the relationship between radon and lung cancer was set, and that's sort of where the research has got to. So once something becomes a carcinogen, there's often not a lot of incentive for people to continue to go because the policies that control the exposure should be stringent enough to protect people from other things. But since that research was done, which was mostly on men healthy men who worked in underground mines, and they clearly saw an increase in cancer over time. This is a chronic exposure, not an acute exposure. Since those studies in the 40s and 50s, there have been newer research that looks at radon exposure during pregnancy. And also relationship between radon and, interestingly, metabolic disease. So that's going on in the United States. So it's possible that radon does contribute to other health effects, but we clearly know at this moment in time that it causes cancer. And as such, we used to have a higher level. We used to be 800 becquerels, but in 2007, recognizing the increasing concern globally about radon exposure, Canada dropped its regulatory guideline to 200 becquerels per meters cubed. So when those little tests go into people's homes, they try to help you understand how many becquerels. And a becquerel is a measure of how radon disintegrates over time. So how many radon disintegrations there are in a cubic meter of air in your home. Health Canada has tried since 2007 to educate people about what radon is. And here they're trying to contextualize the deaths, comparing different things. So versus car accidents, deaths from carbon monoxide and house fires, you can clearly see that per year, radon is attributed to the deaths of more Canadians than those other commonly known established causes of mortality. And interestingly, carbon monoxide is a gas, and we do have carbon monoxide monitors theoretically in everybody's home, but we don't yet have radon monitors required to be in people's homes. And this is one of the biggest problems. People don't know what radon is, they don't know how to test, and we don't require buildings to be built in a way where everybody knows what the radon levels are inside. And if the radon levels are elevated, there is a simple fix, and I'll talk about that later. But they consider that radon is a significant but preventable exposure. So I'm just going to spend a minute talking about cancer in BC. So in BC, cancer is the leading cause of death. That's not exactly the same in other provinces, but in BC it is. And in BC, we're also fortunate because fewer people have been smoking for a longer period of time. But that hasn't meant that the lung cancer rates have really actually gone down. And it's surprising now, and this is part of why I'm not going to talk about smoking, but 30% of new lung cancers in BC are in people who have never smoked. And this is really causing researchers a lot of concern and also interest in what are those other things that are causing people causing people to die prematurely. And the problem with lung cancer is, like pancreatic cancer, it's a very unsurvivable cancer. So the 5-year survival rate is only about 22%. To contrast that, if you develop breast cancer here in British Columbia, your likelihood of surviving after 5 years is closer to 90%. So this is a common low survivable cancer that we really, because of there's been such a focus on smoking and a stigma around smoking, I think we haven't really spent enough time trying to understand these other things that contribute to lung cancer. At Take Action, we increasingly get people who call who've never tested but have developed lung cancer as non-smokers, or their animal has developed lung cancer, and they say, well, what is this thing, and can we get a test? And if you know someone who has developed lung cancer, they can reach out and get a free test kit from what's called the White Ribbon Program. So how are you exposed to radon gas? Again, it's a soil gas, so it is constantly going from the breakdown of radium. It is being sent off out from the soil into the space around the soil, and often it is off gas to outdoor air. And in that case, it tends to be fairly low, although there are parts of the prairie provinces where radon levels can be high even outside. But it's indoors, this is really the issue. So we know that radon can accumulate inside buildings. It comes in through cracks and floors and walls around sump pumps and then drains and gaps that exist around things like footings. And there are higher levels in the basement and ground contact rooms, but sometimes second and third levels can be very high. That can be influenced by things like furnaces that draw air in the basement and then send air around in a home. And again, you can't know what the level is unless you test. This is a map of British Columbia. This is a map of British Columbia that's called what we know as the radon potential. So this was actually used by geologists to better understand the distribution of uranium in the province. And there's this sort of interesting diagonal that goes along from the southeast to the northwest. And over time, literally the ice ages have moved the uranitic or uranium-rich rock all over this province. So there's some parts where we see very high levels of radon, other parts where we see lower levels. But what's interesting is that almost all regions have homes that are above that 200 becquerel guideline. And there's a few different reasons for that. So this is the radon potential map. And then I'm going to also show you what we have at the BC CDC, which is an actual map of people's homes that have measured. And increasingly, we're getting buildings as well, things like schools. But this is an integrated database. It is a living database. So as people test, they can donate their data to science. And we are learning more and more about what the radon levels are in people's homes. And we are beginning to see that kind of diagonal pattern, although testing in the northwest of BC has been fairly low. So there's communities up here that are testing right now, for example, in Atlin. But the southeast part of British Columbia has been actually fairly well tested. Dr. or Dana Schmidt, some of you may be familiar with him from Castlegar, but he's had a nonprofit for the last 10 years that's really been focused on raising awareness as his wife died of radon-related lung cancer, and he's been providing people with free kits. So right now, our BC CDC database has over 40,000 data points in it, which is a lot. And you can click on the different regions. So you can look at this by health region. You can look at it by local health delivery area. You can also look at it by municipality. And it will tell you how many people have tested in your community. And then it will pump out this output. So for example, one of the regions we know there's high levels is in and around Kelowna. This is the district of Lake Country. And you can see this is the darker the color, the higher the proportion of homes over a certain level. In this case, there was quite a few that are very high in the 2000s. So that's 10 times the guideline limit. Again, this is a publicly accessible resource. If you type in bccdc.ca/radon, you'll find it. And you might ask, well, where did all those data points come from again? So some of them were from the BC Lung Foundation. Some of them have been from Dana Schmidt. Some of them are from contractors who supply their data. Health Canada has done testing. And then this was some research that was done in Castlegar and Prince George. And again, we see this very sort of elevated levels in the southeast part of the province. And this was done in about 2016, these studies. So what is troubling about the problem of radon? So unlike smoking, where fewer people are smoking, what we are seeing over time is that radon levels are actually going up. So Dr. Jing Chen is our lead radiation scientist in Canada. Unfortunately, she will be retiring this year. But her analysis shows this line we're seeing over time, this interesting increase. And when I saw this, when it was first published, I started to be interested in kind of what was going on in the 70s and then again after the 2000s that might be causing these sort of peaks. And this led me to be interested in energy efficiency and what is going on there. And, because in the 70s, there was a huge, many of you might not remember the 70s, but there was a large influence around energy efficiency, and people started to be concerned about it because energy became really expensive all of a sudden. And then we had a similar increase in the 2000s as people were becoming more aware of energy efficiency and its impact on climate change. So the interesting thing about radon is it is not just what's in the soil. So you can have a lot of radon in the soil under your house, but if your house is built with a membrane that is sealed and there's no cracks and gaps, the likelihood of the radon getting in is very low. So it's the concentration. If, of course, if you have a leaky house, but you have no radium in the ground under your home, then you won't have any radon. But there's home specific factors. And what we realized is air tightness is really important. So factors like the age of when a house was built, the size of the house's footprint. So the bigger the house, the more likely it is to have radon, in part because large slabs have more cracks over time. As the house settles, there can be more cracks. The tighter the house, the higher the radon level can be. The design, certain features that cause or pull soil gases up out of the ground, like vaulted ceilings, can contribute as well. And then renovations. So when people have gone in and tightened up their home to keep energy from going out, it means that the energy is not lost, the heat is not lost, but also the gases and the things that are inside the home stay trapped. And so unless the house is balanced, there's going to be a problem with the buildup of different things. So that can include even carbon dioxide, VOCs, thick fumes from cooking as well. All sorts of things can build up once we seal up a house. And there's probably many in this call that know more about that than me. So I started a program at the BC Lung Foundation where we talked about energy efficiency and radon. First of all, I did a review called Making the Connection Between the Evidence and the Outcomes. And then they have a law and policy analyst who has done some other work as well. This is all publicly available. And again, this was pro bono work for me. So what specific factors I looked at increased radon levels? Well, again, things like double and triple glazing windows, weather stripping, and continuous insulation or cavity insulation with a new air barrier. Those things that seal up homes were clearly found to increase radon levels in sometimes double in retrofitted homes. But the impacts of retrofits were greater in regions where the radon under the house was higher. So in places where you already have the potential for radon to be there, those energy retrofit impacts could be more significant. A lot of this work was, though, done in the UK, and the housing there can be a bit different than in Canada. What the UK research found was that the more energy retrofit things people had done, so if they'd done ceiling and insulation and replaced windows and doors, the greater the radon level could be. But then and that the levels actually varied between rooms after retrofits, which can often reflect the fact that certain parts of the house, the ventilation patterns can change. But also in things like passive homes, what they found was that there was actually lower radon levels in some passive homes, and that was consistent throughout the house. So that information has been very helpful for us in Canada, but it's not Canadian specific research. So we still don't have a lot of evidence from here in Canada on this, although the government has taken this all very seriously and they've started to do some research. What was clear was that things where air was mechanically drawn out of the house could also cause a problem by unbalancing a house. So people also often ask me about HRVs or heat recovery ventilation systems. And if they're balanced, they can help prevent the gas from being drawn up into the house. But if they're unbalanced, they're going to end up sucking the gas even more from the ground and pushing it into the house and then hopefully eventually outside. But HRVs can both increase or decrease the radon levels, really depending on how well they're actually working. So we tell people not to rely on an ERV or an HRV to be a radon mitigation system in your house. You really need to have somebody come and take a look at your house to make sure if you do have elevated radon that your HRV isn't contributing to the problem. So there's a lot of different ways that you can test for radon. The little one I showed you in the beginning was this little puck. So these are what's called 91-day or Alpha Track test kits. They can be free if you talk to me, or you can pay up to $40 for them. And then you get one, you put it in your house for 91 days, and then you send it back for a lab to be tested. The ones behind them are digital ones. The one on the left with the display screen, those are devices that you can actually take out of the library. Certain libraries across BC have them. The other ones are more gee whiz. They're a couple $100s. Some of them, the one on the right, can be up to $300. But these allow you to do real-time radon monitoring. The reason why we want to do the little pucks for 91 days is that radon is a gas. And so if you open your doors a lot or you keep your doors shut, the levels can actually vary quite a bit. So we want to get an average understanding of what your radon is. So we want people to keep these little, the ones in the front, the little devices, because they're much, again, they're cheaper and simpler. You need to keep them there for about 3 months so that we can get an average snapshot. The devices behind are not actually certified by Health Canada. And so they're really considered more of a screening than a professional test. So the good news about radon is you don't need to hire someone to do your radon testing for you. You can just buy one of these or get one of these little kits at the front. Or you can hire a professional to come and they will bring a more robust device. Or you can buy one of these and you can do a screening assessment on your house if you like. There's lots of options. So what if your house is above 200? There's something called a radon mitigation system, which sounds fancy, but it's really not. It's just a pipe that gets put underneath your house, and the pipe then has a fan on it, and the fan draws the radon gas up into the pipe, and then it vents it out of your house, and out either to the side or the roof. And now in BC, all new homes actually have to be built with this whole system in it except the fan. So up until recently, they could just put a pipe into your house with a cap on it, but that became problematic because sometimes the cap came off or people didn't know where they were in a house, or sometimes that pipe could actually leak and put radon in a house rather than not. So that was problematic. So now the pipe has to be up and out, and then you have to test still to know if you need a fan. In some cases, that pipe actually can automatically start to reduce radon from your home. But to make it more efficient, you need to test and then buy a fan if you need to. And the fan doesn't use much energy and they're quite quiet. So it's a much cheaper solution. The Canadian government, if you're a handy person, does have a reduction guide for Canadians that's available for free online, and it is quite technical. This is beyond my area of expertise, and these slides were provided to me by the Canadian Association of Energy Auditors that provided these slides for me. So you might say to yourself, well, how am I going to hire someone that I know can fix this odorless, colorless, tasteless gas in my house? And to address that concern, because that's a real thing, someone could come and just wave their hands and say, oh, it's all done now, you're fine, and walk away. So Canada has designed what's called the National Radon Certification Program. So in order to be considered a radon mitigation professional, you have to have completed this course. And they have a website so that if you want to find someone to either test or, I don't know, it's jumping around, either test or fix your home, you can go to the CNRPP website, you type in your postal code, and they will list you all the certified professionals that exist in and around your region. And the good news is in BC is we have a growing number of people, particularly in the Okanagan region, that can fix people's homes that we trust. I'd mentioned earlier the 100 Test Kit Challenge, and some of you may have taken part in this. This is a program where the federal government provides us with funds, and we go to communities all across Canada to provide 100 free test kits for people who are interested in testing. And the whole point of this program is to raise awareness and get people testing and to realize how easy it is. In BC, the information is then drawn into that anonymously without any personally identifying information. It's drawn into the radon database and then used to help further our understanding of what radon levels are. But it's a fun way to test for radon because you're testing with other people. And again, it's free. And we onboard people and talk about radon. And then at the end, people can come back when they're finished testing and ask questions. And we also have presentations and then meetings. And then if your area does have higher levels, we can do calls and present to mayor and council and talk to the building officials in your community about what radon is. And we bring professionals in just so that people are more aware that it's something that they have to really consider when there's new builds or people are getting permits for renovations. And these are just some results from BC. You can see the measures level or vary quite a bit. So recently we were told that the Fraser Valley in Vancouver didn't have much radon, and you can see in BC, in Coquitlam, there were only the 2 homes out of 113 that tested above 200. But we found that Cultus Lake, interestingly, had about 30, almost 30% of homes were above the 200 level. So that was a surprise. And then we continue to see these fairly high rates in and around Kelowna. And that's not surprising. There was a large uranium mine called the Blizzard Mine that was supposed to be developed, but a moratorium in the 1980s put a kibosh on that. But the uranium hasn't gone away, and it won't. It's going to stay there for another billion years at least. So that area, the underground, the likelihood of uranium being found in the Okanagan is quite high. And as I mentioned before, libraries do have some not all libraries, but many do. So 30% of libraries in BC have digital monitors in them that you can take out for free. So if you just want to learn a bit more, they come in a tub, they have pamphlets and information. There's also a coupon to buy an alpha track detector in there that you can take. And I've been going to libraries across the Okanagan. So yeah, Fraser Interior Health has the highest proportion of devices, but Fraser Health also has quite a few as well. And we have some here in Metro Van. So if you live in the north, though, we don't have as many digital devices to lend there yet. But librarians are awesome people. As Ed, this is my cat who always likes to come around when I'm presenting. So I'm just going to show you here now, but she is down here and she enjoys the radon, the boxes. She likes this one much more than the alpha trackers. But I'm going to stop here, but I do want to give a shout out to my colleague, Dr. Gurpreet Sandhu, who's been doing a lot of advocacy in Surrey. And if you are someone who knows that your radon levels are high, there's two things I just want to end with. One is there's a new mitigation program in Canada for the Canadian Lung Association, so you could apply to offset the cost of mitigation. The other is if your radon test result is over 800, we've started a screening program in BC, Vancouver and Kelowna, and you can have your lungs checked using a low dose CT screen for free and quite quickly. I signed up for this study because my mom died of lung cancer and I grew up in the Okanagan. So I signed up recently and it honestly took 5 minutes and I was just in and out. So they can check your lungs if you have over 800 becquerels in your home. And I'm going to stop there and see if there are any questions.
Amazing. Thank you so much. We do have a couple of questions.
Okay.
So first one is from Nadia. She says, if I have tested prior to renovation work and it was low radon levels, and she said that's 133. She said, should I kind of include radon management in the renovation work or retest after the renovation and then consider radon?
That's a great question. I would retest after. Yeah.
Any particular reason for that?
Because it's not 100% guaranteed that retrofits are going to increase radon levels. It's also recommended that people test every 5 years because things change. And what we were learning that radon itself, like under the underground environment, changes quite a bit. All sorts of things can influence radon levels, and that includes things like if there's development that's been done nearby you. Fracking turns out to increase radon levels, and we do have that in certain parts of British Columbia. And then the atmosphere can change radon levels as well, periods of low and high pressure. So over time, houses also settle and changes can happen in a house. So there is this recommendation to consider settling and time. And that's part of why this 5 years has come online as for people to think about. But also with retrofits, you can't be guaranteed that it's going to increase levels. It seems to both increase in some and decrease in others. So it's not a guarantee their level would go up, but I would test again afterwards.
Amazing. Thank you. Deirdre has asked if they have a heat pump installed and it's a kind of ducted heat pump using their forced air system. They say they have small room with a radon reading of 250 to 300, but the other areas in the house have an acceptable radon reading. Are they going to increase their likelihood of spreading radon across the house using that forced air system or not?
That I don't think there's a simple answer to that question. One of the things we do say that is sometimes people find that they have pockets of high radon in their basement, but it's not in a space where they spend a lot of time. So if that 250 to 300 room is not a place where people spend 4 or more hours a day, I wouldn't worry too much about that. But we do see that forced air systems can blow air around, and the radon is a gas in the air. So you might want to get a digital monitor and test some of the other rooms after that system goes on, just to make sure that you're not distributing the radon into other parts of the home.
Okay. She also says that they have a radon pump as well
Oh,
already.
they have one already. Is it hooked up and working?
We'll say
Okay.
yes.
Yeah, I would, whoever, I'm gonna guess that it's a newer home then, or if someone came to put one in and you're interested, I would go back to the contractor that put it in and ask them to come follow up with testing. Because they should be able to come in with their sniffers. They have these high-tech equipment that they could use to see what's going on in terms of your room, the rooms in your home and where you spend time and where you don't. We don't want people to test for radon in crawl spaces because again, those can be quite high, but most people aren't living in their crawl space. So when we are testing for radon, you want to do it in a room where you spend 4 or more hours. A bedroom is a good place because lots of people, we're sleeping, hopefully you're sleeping 7 to 8 hours, but that tends to be the space where people spend most of their time, that in the living room. So those are the places to test, not the nooks and crannies where the gas could build up.
Thank you. Trevor has asked, I've heard different things about using 6 mil poly vapor barrier and whether that is sufficient to stop radon, for example, in a bare ground crawl space. Do you have any insight into that?
That, I'm sorry, is a bit beyond my pay grade. So there might be someone
Okay.
else on this call that can answer that better. I know that there is a poly membrane that's required for new homes. I just don't know the thickness of it. I have been told the thicker the membrane, the less likely it is to have things get poked through it. And so that's the issue, is that the membrane itself can be infiltrated and then it just leaks.
Deirdre has asked, in the EU, the top level is 100 BQ. Why is Canada's higher, well, than the Europeans is lower?
Well, the short answer is that we are a uranium-rich country. We supplied the uranium that went towards the Manhattan Project in the United States. We have some of the largest reserves of uranium in the world. We also have people who live near those uranium reserves. So when the government was trying to figure out what was going to be practicable in Canada, in the United States is about 100, they use a measurement of roughly 150. They, of course, they're US, so they use a different measurement. They use a picocurie. I'm named after Marie Curie. We use a becquerel named after Henry Becquerel, but ours is the same as the European system. So it's 150 becquerels in the US. Our radon problem is arguably worse, and the Canadian government felt that the best we could do was 200. But that's a great question because 200 doesn't mean it's safe under 200. It just means that the relative risk is not doubled at that point in time. So we really start to see the health consequences when people are chronically exposed over 200. But if we wanted to reduce the most amount of cancer risk in Canada, we would drop that to 100 because there's a lot of people that live with houses between 100 and 200. And that's again, a 199 is not safe. Below 100, we tend to see negligible risk, but there is still some risk between 100 to 200.
All right, we got some questions about test kits now.
Okay.
Trevor's asked, with the library radon kit, is a 3 week loan period long enough for testing, or is that too short?
We try to get them to lend you the devices for 4 weeks if you can. So if you can get a renewal on it, depending on which library system you're in, some of them have waits, so people can't get a renewal, but 3 weeks is still better. The device manufacturer says it's accurate after 1 week. We prefer 4, but 3 is getting pretty close to 4. And you shouldn't notice that it changes that much, even at the end of your second week, unless you're doing things with your home that are quite a bit different. So if you can try to keep your home at a steady state for 3 weeks, it'll give you a pretty good rough idea. Wintertime levels tend to be higher than summertime, However, as people have more air conditioning and continue to have closed home systems in the summer, that's changing too. So yeah, try to pick a period where you don't open your windows and doors a lot and you have your heating on, and that should give you a ballpark estimate of what the levels are.
Kate has asked, I did a test for a year, but I never sent it in. Is it still valid?
They are valid for up to 2 years. So yes, you could still wrap it up, put the actual date, like the time period, because what happens with that long-term test is it is a specialized piece of plastic. And as the radiation goes through it, it pits the plastic. So they basically count up the pits on this piece of plastic and then they divide it by the number of days that it has been in use. So if they look at your 1 year and they think it's only 3 months, you are likely going to have a much higher level than what it is. So just make sure you put a good estimate of how many days you had tested when you send it back in, and then they can give you the more accurate result.
Perfect. All right. A couple of questions about accessing the test kits. How can people access them? Is there a list of libraries that have the tests available? Are they available in hardware stores? How can people get hold of them?
Um, I'm just going to write this. Take action on radon. If you go to this website, if you type in take action on radon in Google, you should come to and maybe Amber, you can put the website in there, but there is a section that says test, and it will list all the places in Canada where you can get information on test kits. There is no centralized information about what libraries have the devices yet. I'm working on it in BC, but if you type in your local library and just type in radon, it will tell you whether or not you have detectors. And if you're if you're in the interior, there's a pretty good chance that you do have them, although the Okanagan system has 400 people on the wait list at some of the branches. So we are trying to remedy that problem because I think it's great for people to have access to a free digital device because it really gives you a sense of what's going on in your home too. And they're great teaching tools for me, and they're very educational for the public. Thank you, Amber. Yes, under test, there's should be information on where and how to get a test kit. And if you're interested, if you'd like to host a 100 test kit challenge in your community, or you're interested in having you and your neighbors test, or your book club, or your 4-H group, or whatever you'd like, on the Take Action site, there is a place called the 100 Test Kit Challenge, and you can email us and nominate your community. We can only do so many communities in BC a year. We've done almost 5,000 people have tested in BC through this program for free so far, which is great. But the sooner we know that you want to test, the better, because we can get you in queue for the fall.
Amazing. Okay, I think that's all the questions at the moment. Oh, Trevor has just asked, can renters hold their landlords to any legal requirement for mitigating radon?
Not yet in British Columbia, but in Alberta, we have seen a few cases where tenants did have high levels in northern Alberta. And there, public health people did speak to a landlord about mitigating. So that has occurred. But currently in BC, there is no requirement for landlords to fix or test. And again, there's no requirements to test your home for radon. You're doing it something voluntary. The only thing that really is new building codes that are really designed to help reduce radon easily for people that they still have to test to find out. So we're kind of in this limbo land where it's sort of buyer beware, and it's up to you to figure out what's going on in your environment. I'm trying to work for a better day when houses again have, like, they're built with monitors in them so that you can know whether or not your home is elevated or not. And some regulation to require people to provide safe housing, but that doesn't exist yet.
All right, thank you so much for your presentation. Super interesting. I know I learned a lot, especially coming from the UK. You know, I had no idea what radon was when I got here, and I'm still learning. So, yeah, thank you so much for all of the information you shared and the questions.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, if people have done anything that closes up your home, if you're a person that knows about your building envelope, or if you've made changes to save energy, it merits a retest. And if you do live in the southeast part of BC, I really encourage you to test your home We found some very 35,000 becquerels in some homes in the southeast of BC. That's very high. And the Okanagan and the Kootenays are on par with the percentage of homes that are the highest in Canada. There was just a recent study done that was put out last October, and central BC and the Atlantic provinces have some of the highest levels that have been encountered. And that's kind of shocking because we were told that BC didn't have a radon problem and we were considered like a superfluous province. And it hasn't been until the work that the BC CDC has done that really the federal government has acknowledged that the radon problem is so bad here in BC. So as we continue to build in the Okanagan and build new nice homes, everyone should be talking to each other about testing for this carcinogen. So thank you all for being interested in this, and please tell people. Now you know way more about radon than anybody. That's you probably know, and you can answer that question when the census comes around. Do you know about radon? You can be like yes, and we can increase that number. But please tell people that you know and love because it can save their life.
Amazing. Have you
Okay.
got time for two more short questions?
Sure, sure.
Right there. Okay. So Noral has asked, how many kits do you recommend for a home? One for every room or just your most lived-in rooms?
You really just need one, unless, I mean, I live in Vancouver in a tiny house, so maybe your house is many, many thousands of square feet, but you really just need one for a home, and it's the spaces where you spend 4 or more hours. So a living room, a TV room. If you have an office in your basement, that's a great place to test if you work in your basement, or a bedroom. So you really just need the one.
Perfect. And last question, Jerry has asked, if I tested once about 15 years ago and it was okay, do I need to test again?
Well, I would think about what's been going on in your neighborhood, Gary, and in and around you. And you can get a test from the library for free, and if you can take one out from the library, that's easy. And if not, you can try to get in on one of our 100 test kit challenges in the fall because things can change.
Amazing. All right. Thank you so much for your time. We'll let you go.
Okay, thank
All
you.
right. Take
Enjoy the
care.
rest of your session. Okay, bye-bye.